You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, good morning, everybody. On a little early this morning. Got a busy week ahead, so I needed to have the time this afternoon. So there you go. How you doing, Josh?
Oh, doing great.
You know, another great week ahead. Going to be busy.
Gotta love it.
Yeah, you gotta love it. Okay. Got some stuff going on with Airwave this week.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, good. Keeps y'all busy. Keeps you employed,
Exactly.
Off the streets.
That's ideal.
Just,
I'd
you know.
like to not be homeless if that's
Yeah, it'd be nice. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk today about what went on this weekend with Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin, which I have some very pointed commentary about. And then also, if I have time, which I think I will, I'm going to talk about what's going on in D.C. with the law enforcement issue, which got a lot of people kind of worked up, pretty intense. And I just, again, have some thoughts on that. You're welcome to them. That's why it says across the bottom here, you're entitled to my opinion. All right. But before we jump on the opinion, we need to talk about the sponsors real quick. And again, I always make the user proviso. These are my opinions, not particularly theirs. So if you want to know what they're thinking, you're welcome to find out. Anyway, our place, as always, is a great place. It is great, not just great breakfast and lunch, but it's just great service. It's a great atmosphere. It's very diverse, welcoming atmosphere. So I really enjoy that place a lot. You walk in there. Plus, you always can tell the good places where the cops eat, and quite often I go there, particularly for breakfast, and there's either Burleson or Fort Worth cops there, and it's always reassuring to see a member of the police there eating. Also, Gina's Pizza is always great. You'll go out and get your pizza this week. It's going to be a hot week. Your school started. You know, your mom and dad, you're a little bit stressed. You might as well just take it easy and go out there and get yourself a pizza as opposed to what are we going to have for dinner now and that kind of thing. Believe me, the kids would appreciate it. So give a shout out to that. Also, thank you to our friend John Williams. Here as I share all that with the various groupings here. There's so many. Here you go. Also, John Williams, All Pro Roofing. He does a great job. He really does. And he doesn't try to give you a bunch of routine about sales and all this other stuff. You either going to need it or you're not going to need it. And he'll tell you the truth about the matter. And that's what's really nice about John and all the above. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here. Okay, good. Now, Pro Roofing, John Williams, 817-734-2756. One more time, 817-734-2756. He'll come check your roof out, find out if it's good to go, and he'll tell you. Also, Jeff Kelly, if you're looking to move in and around the area, you definitely need Jeff because the real estate slowed down some because everybody's waiting on Jerome Powell to make a decision about the interest rates, and then we'll see what else calls it up. But right now, the housing market in Johnson County is still fairly decent, but around the DFW area and extended areas, it's kind of slow. And you need somebody like Jeff that knows how to get these things done, how to get a house sold. So call him at 817-781-0546. That is 817-781-0546, or Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com. He's with the Wethington Agency here in town. So, you know, again, you're dealing with local folks, not some massive organization like Zillow or whatever else. Also, thank you to Tiffany Jane over at the Local Life magazine. Right now, she's putting together the September issue. So check out what's coming out in August on locallifetx.com, or it's been mailed to 30,000 homes. A lot of retailers have it. Well, you know, you can peruse it while you wait or while you shop or whatnot. So Local Life magazine, a great magazine, because not only does it go out to a lot of people, but it also has really good local articles, which are nice to know. Okay. So what happened over the weekend? Well, here's the thing. Trump desperately wants peace in Ukraine for a lot of reasons, particularly for the credit and the glory that will come with that. I want to dispense the two, canards about what Trump is and is not. First of all, I'm not going to approach this from the position that Trump is some sort of Russian asset or plant or anything like that. I don't really believe that Russian hoax business really was that impactful in the election. I don't believe that he is some sort of secret agent for Russia or anything like that, and so there's nothing like that. Second of all, you have to also understand about Trump that he really, honestly, is not a war hawk. He is sincerely opposed to wars. All right, so I can give him credit for that. He campaigned in 16 and in 20 about how dumb it was to be in Iraq and all this other stuff. And he did at the end of his term arrange for the withdrawal troops from Afghanistan that Joe Biden so thoroughly mucked up. And so he's not a war hawk by any means. People say, wait a minute, what about that business in Iran? That really is an anomaly. That was not something that we would have done on our own without serious evidence that Iran was getting close to a nuclear bomb and they were a serious threat to the region and things of that nature. So that really was out of character for Mr. Trump. Now, that being said, there's another thing you should know about Trump, and that he's jealous of Putin. There's no question. He looks at Vladimir Putin with envy because Putin doesn't have to deal with the New York Times. He doesn't have to deal with the Democrats in Congress. He doesn't have to deal with, social media. He doesn't have to deal with the public opinion polls. He doesn't have to deal with a lot of these things. He basically, the way he looks at Putin and other people similar to him is that he could do what he wants and get away with it, and he could act aggressively and with strength and fortitude and all this other stuff. He's jealous of Mr. Putin. He wishes he could have that power to be able to do that. And he's made no bones about that, really. I mean, this isn't something I'm supposing or trying to read his mind or anything like that. He's made it clear the people he really regards are the people that can act aggressively and without a lot of restraint and without a lot of doubt and whatever else. Just like he has the same opinion about Xi Jinping of China. The Duarte, the leader of the Philippines, is a very similar. Orban of Hungary. These are the kind of leaders that Trump would like to be. Our system doesn't really allow it, despite what you think. I mean, people are yelling and hollering all the time about how Trump is trampling on the Constitution. Well, if that were true, and I think he has taken some liberties with the Constitution, there's no question about that. And I've said that before on this program. But he still has some restraints, and he chafes against those restraints. Also, and there's another factor, and this is something I think I've read a couple places, but I always thought he really would like to have a Nobel Peace Prize. He really sticks in his craw that Barack Obama got one in 2009 for really basically doing nothing, which I agree. Even Obama was surprised he got that Peace Prize in 2009 when he'd been in office about 3 months. But the point is that he really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Why does he want it so badly? Because he doesn't want to just be president of the United States. He wants to be seen as a world transformational figure. And he has done some moderations of certain other conflicts. He got involved about 3 months ago with India and Pakistan when they were squaring off, and that would not have been good. And there's a couple of African conflicts that he's basically stepped in and said, well, that's enough of that, and we're going to work the negotiations out. And he takes a lot of credit for that. But this is a different deal. Vladimir Putin is probably one of the most ruthless autocrats we've had in the post-Cold War era. And nothing motivates Vladimir Putin more than trying to recreate the glory of the Soviet Union. He saw and has said that the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century was when the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. And he's been trying to recreate that ever since. It's not just Ukraine that he's invaded. It's also Georgia, also Azerbaijan, also Chechnya. Also, he has put a lot of pressure on some of these other former Soviet satellites to get in line. Now, a little history between Russia and Ukraine. It'll just be a little one. First of all, Ukraine as a distinct autonomous nation is a 20th century creation. Now, we've had Ukrainians, forever, but they've all been subsumed in parts of Poland or Prussia or Russia or others. In the Versailles Treaty of 1919, Ukraine was established. But when the Russians created the Soviet Socialist Republics in 1922, Ukraine was taken over by Russian-backed communists, and they became part of the Soviet Union. And then in the 1930s, in order to get money for the industrialization of Russia, they basically starved Ukraine to death. They exported all their wheat, and millions of Ukrainians died in that famine in the 1930s. It's underreported. We didn't know much about it really until about 30 years ago. But in the 1930s, anywhere from 4 to 6 million Ukrainians starved to death because of Russian confiscation of their wheat. That's why when the Germans came through in 1942, so many Ukrainians joined the Nazi cause, not because they were Nazis as such, but they were anti-Russian. And so you had Ukrainian units fighting with Germans. You had Ukrainian guards at the POW camps that kept the Russians and whatnot. And then when the Russians retook that area, many Ukrainians were executed or forced to fight for the Russians. Now, let's be clear, Russia has never considered Ukraine to be an independent country. They have never considered it to be anything but Russian territory stolen by another group and forced upon the world by international powers. So when it's very similar, Putin has a very similar attitude towards Ukraine that Hitler had towards Poland and Czechoslovakia. They're just taking over territory that was once theirs. There's a German-speaking people there. That's our territory. We're going to get it back. That's what happens here in Ukraine. Okay? Ukraine has, particularly in the far eastern part of it, a lot of Russian speakers, a lot of Russian influence. And so Putin considers that to be Russian territory that has been misappropriated by Ukraine, backed by international powers like NATO. And so that's one reason why this war exists, is that Putin doesn't want Ukraine to exist. And he's going to get that territory back one way or the other. And let's fast forward now to this past weekend. Trump, set up this meeting, a brief meeting in Alaska. And he made it pretty clear that this was like a meeting to set up future meetings, and he didn't expect any, breakthroughs as such. But he did go in there very clearly saying that he expected a ceasefire to exist and then negotiations to begin. To him, that was a non-negotiable. In fact, on the flight over there, he said, I'm quoting him himself, "I'm not going to be happy, and there would be severe consequences if there was no ceasefire." And then what happens is he comes out of the meeting. It was a very brief meeting. It was only like a couple hours, and then they had lunch, and then they had this press conference, if you will, but there was no questions taken. And Trump had completely changed his tone. He basically said, we'll negotiate for peace, but there would be no ceasefire. So while this negotiation is to begin, the killing will continue. And what gets to me about all that is that all that bluster, all that tough talk, and this is not just on the flight to Alaska, we're talking about for weeks. Trump has said how stupid this war is and how people are getting killed and how many children are getting killed, and we need to stop this right now. And then he goes into this meeting, and a couple hours later, he comes back, changed his tone totally. The short answer is Trump got played like a Steinway piano on this deal. Trump talks about what a great deal maker he was. He got played because he walked in there and said, "We will have a ceasefire." And he walks out of there and says, "Well, we'll continue to let them bomb Ukrainian hospitals and schools while we negotiate a peace," which Putin has no interest in making this a quick deal. Here's the thing about the Russians in war. We look at war a lot differently than they do. We look at, look at those casualty numbers. We need to do something about this. The Russians have had killed, 250,000 of their men have been killed in this war. Another 950,000 have been wounded. So they already have well over 1 million casualties. And that's the way they fight wars. That's why they had such tremendous fatality numbers in both the world wars, is because they just keep throwing people at them. They just wave after wave. They still fight very primitive wars in a way. They may have better tech equipment, drones, etc., but they still throw manpower at it. And so they have over 1 million dead and wounded, 250 million killed. Let's put that in perspective. That's 5 times almost as many as we lost in Vietnam. 250,000 is how many we lost in the entirety of World War II. And in this war, very isolated war, for 3 years, they've had 250,000 million, say it right, dummy, 250,000 men killed. And they're going to have more. And so all this talk about stop the killing and all this other stuff was changed in a 2-hour meeting. And so as far as what the Europeans have said and what he said was that Here's what Trump said. He came out and said, quote, "It was determined by all that it is better to go directly to negotiating a peace agreement without first implementing a ceasefire." By all, there's only 2 men in that room. He was basically implying that the Europeans were on board with this. They are not, and that's what they're going to be in there today. Today, they're going to meet with Trump along with Zelensky, and they're basically going to support Zelensky and say, this has to happen. But they did not agree to this. In fact, European leaders, I'm reading from the Washington Post article, European leaders publicly and privately made clear that this was not the case. They issued a statement that did not echo Mr. Trump's claim that peace talks were preferable to a ceasefire. Britain, France, Germany, and others threatened to increase economic penalties on Russia as long as the killing in the Ukraine continues. This also, I'm quoting again from the Post, in a complete reversal, Mr. Trump wrote on social media on Saturday that after speaking with Mr. Putin, he believed a peace agreement would be preferable to a ceasefire. He said he had spoken to European leaders by phone and claimed they shared his view. Those phone calls didn't happen. Okay, so almost immediately, all the leaders of the European nations and NATO said, this is not the case. We don't endorse this. We want a ceasefire right now and then begin negotiating. They know that Putin's going to drag this thing out. And this is what's kind of really got me so irritated about this is that Trump always talks tough and then he backs down. They have a term for it. You know, Trump always chickens out or tacos. I don't really get into that too much, but he does it on tariffs a lot. But he did with Putin. He talked like, I'm going to talk with Vladimir. We're going to get this killing stopped, and we're going to get a negotiated settlement and move on. And he comes out of there saying, well, we'd agree that it's good to negotiate, but we're not going to have a ceasefire. And what happened? What happened, not just the tough talk, but what happened in that 2-hour meeting? Now, I'm not going to get into all these weird speculations that they got something on Trump or, you know, he has money involved or any of that crap, because I don't have any evidence of that, and neither does anybody else reporting that on social media. That's a rabbit hole that wastes your time. I'm just saying that Trump gets in a meeting with somebody that really is a tough guy, and there you go. Putin doesn't play. And so basically what he got out of that was, boy, what did he get out of it? He got a lot of publicity. He got Trump to turn around 180 degrees. And he got basically what here on the New York Times version of it, the net effect, I'm reading from them, the net effect was to give Mr. Putin a free pass to continue his war against his neighbor indefinitely without further penalty, pending a time-consuming negotiation for a more sweeping deal that appears elusive at best. Instead of a halt to the slaughter, and they quote Trump saying, I'm in this to stop the killing, Mr. Trump had said on the way to Alaska, the president left Anchorage with pictures of him and Mr. Putin joshing around on a red carpet in the presidential limousine, which is also called the Beast, by the way. So the whole point of this is that Putin got everything he wanted and then some. What did we get of it? Nothing. And so how are we going to salvage this deal? That's a pretty good question. What's going to happen today is that they're going to be Zelensky and they're going to have the European leaders there, and they're going to discuss it. And one of the things that came out of this as well was that Zelensky and the Europeans have made it pretty clear that they were not going to accept a land swap. All right, they didn't want to give up land in Ukraine. Zelensky is adamant. He says our own constitution will not allow it, and they're adamant that they not be rewarded. Well, let's see what the territory is. Now, I know if you're listening to this on the radio later that you're not going to see the maps, but let's run through those maps, Josh. And no, that one previous to that. How about that's the one? This is the area in which that we're in dispute here. It's called the Donbas region. Okay, it's the far eastern part of Ukraine, and I know again I'm pointing to a map that y'all on the radio can't see, but hopefully if you're looking at YouTube or Facebook Live right now, you can see it. The area that's dark shaded orange is territory held by the Russians right now. Okay, and there's other pieces of it up in the northern part of Ukraine, but small pieces. The larger gold area is the Donbas region. Now, this region has a lot of Russian speakers, and it's kind of, if you want to put it in an American context, it's kind of like, South Texas for us, a very bicultural area. And so it's same thing there. And this is the claim that the Russians are using, that, this is our territory and all this other stuff. But this is the region they want, is that gold outlined area, which is basically two of their eastern provinces. They call them oblasts, by the way, if you ever see that in print. But the two eastern provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, and I don't know these names very well either, but Donbas is the region. All right, so try the second one. See in Josh, yeah, and this is kind of give a perspective how much territory we're talking about as a total of the Ukraine. Okay, and this would include rather the area that they already took back in 2014, that Crimean Peninsula. They just walked in and took it, and Obama said, "Well, don't do that again." Well, okay, and then there's the third map. It gives it kind of a more distinct picture of what Donbas is, and you can see the region there. And here's the thing as well. You'd say, well, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just some territory, right? A lot of Russians live there. It's also the heart of their industrial area. That's going to be where most of their ores and mining, their rare earth minerals that Trump is so excited about accessing, that's where a lot of that is mined and operated out of. It would be a significant economic blow to the Ukrainian government and to the Ukrainian people. This isn't just some, desert land out west. This would be, taking a large part of the economic entity out of Ukraine. Here, I'm going to take a drink here for a minute. And we're getting a little dry here. Anyway, so that's the deal. That's part of the problem right there. And so a lot of people are very upset with what's going on with this deal. Now, we found out yesterday in those Sunday morning talk shows that there's now going to be some issues of guarantee of security, okay? Mr. Steve Witkoff, who is the envoy to this whole situation, envoy to Ukraine and Russia, he's on CNN, and he said, I'm quoting from the article here, that Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff told CNN that Putin agreed to allow U.S. to provide Ukraine robust security guarantees. We got to an agreement that the United States and other European nations could effectively offer Article 5 language to cover a security guarantee. In reference to the critical NATO provision, Witkoff said, referencing the military's alliance mutual defense clause known as Article 5. Okay, I'll get to that in just a minute. So basically, in exchange for the Donbas region, supposedly, Mr. Putin's going to allow Western troops in Ukraine, not American troops. Okay, I don't see Americans over there. I see NATO troops maybe from the Europeans, but go on and continue with the article. NATO's Article 5, the cornerstone of the alliance, stipulates that an attack on one member is an assault on all, obligating allies to come to each other's defense. The proposed security guarantees for Ukraine would not come through NATO, but rather from select European allies in the event of a Russian-Ukraine peace deal. In other words, if Mr. Zelensky and the Ukrainians are willing to give up that Donbas region, Mr. Putin supposedly, according to Witkoff, who has not impressed me very much in this whole episode, but according to Mr. Witkoff, if the Russians get that piece of land, they would allow for NATO-like protections. Ukraine will never be part of NATO. The Russians have a very, very paranoid view of NATO and always have since its creation in 1949. They see any countries that border them as NATO countries as a threat. Well, this just shows how the war kind of backfired a bit on Mr. Putin. Before the war, the only countries that bordered NATO countries that bordered Russia were Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. Okay, the Baltic states. Now Finland does, and that's 800 miles of territory. And if you know anything about the Finland-Russian relationship, Finland has held its own and then some against the Russians for decades and generations. Anyway, back to the matter. Basically what, according to Mr. Witkoff, what Trump has said would happen, and they didn't say this in the press conference, they didn't say this Saturday, they said it yesterday in one of the talk shows, that Putin would allow military securities for the rest of the Ukraine. Well, I'm skeptical. I very much am skeptical. I'm skeptical for one thing that that'll ever happen. I'm skeptical that Mr. Putin will allow NATO troops on his border. I mean, we have NATO troops in those Baltic states about the size of the Texas National Guard, maybe, and that's about it. So we're not talking about, any kind of threat to the Russians. But I'd be very surprised if he allowed German, French, and British troops and all the apparatus that goes with that to operate within Ukraine and act as a security force. Second of all, as far as giving up the territory, Zelensky and the Ukrainians have been adamant, we will not give it up. What I'm afraid is going to happen to Mr. Zelensky is what happened to Czechoslovakia in 1938. They were basically told, yes, you will. And that infamous Munich deal where Germany got the Sudetenland, which is what he said was part of Germany, but it was part of Czechoslovakia, and the French and the British said, okay, you can have this, but no more. And then about 6 months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay, now we're really mad, they said. Any more territory is a war, and that's when he went into Poland, and off you go. But anyway, the point is that the sticking point is going to be giving up that territory. And Zelensky is going to come under a tremendous pressure, certainly from Trump, and I'm afraid maybe even from the European leaders, to give up that Donbas region. And why I'm opposed to that personally is that Putin will be rewarded for what he's done. He's already been rewarded by when he stole Crimea from him, and now he's going to get rewarded again. And if a few 100,000 Russians die doing it, we got more. That's their attitude. And that's why I am afraid for Zelensky, and I am pro-Ukraine. And the reason I am, for one thing, is because Ukraine, for all its faults, and they got plenty, and you got the corruption they got to deal with, and you can fill in the blank, but they are somebody we can deal with as an ally and a trade partner. Second of all, I really do believe just plain flat out wrong to invade a country, steal a piece of it, and then call it all square. And my third point, I've had debates with other people who have similar views to me on certain things, but not on this. They say, isn't that their business? Is it our business what's going on over there? My point is, if we don't support the Ukrainians right now with what we got, we will have to support our NATO allies. And that means if we uphold Article 5, which we should, that means American men and women. That means boots on the ground, a phrase I always despise. But that's what it means. If we don't support the Ukrainians and their war, we're going to be fighting the Russians, maybe not in our lifetime or anytime soon, in a couple of decades or so, but eventually we will have a situation in which the Russians say, well, we think Latvia and Estonia are Russian territories too, and they invade, and we're going to have to go in there. If we don't show that we are willing to oppose this expansion, sooner or later Americans will be on the ground. Sooner or later, we will have men and women fighting in Europe because we didn't stop the expansion. Okay, we either support the Ukrainians in their fight, or we'll be picking up those guns ourselves within the next 10 to 20 years. You can bet your life on it. I don't know if I'll be around to see it. I'm an old man. But youngins like Josh over here. You want to join the Army, Josh?
Not particularly.
Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah. But see, I really fully believe that with, and people say, well, what happens when Putin goes? Oh, he'll be replaced by another. This is a Russian trait for generations, for centuries. I mean, this isn't something that is a 20th century version. This is they've been expansionists since the 15th century, since the days of Ivan the Terrible and all that business. They've always been expansionist. They've always had conflict with their neighbors to the west. And this is just another version of Russian history. And if we don't show strength now, we're going to be in a situation where we have to. And that means our sons and daughters, or grandsons and granddaughters. And if you don't think that will happen, we didn't think that would happen either in 1938. Okay, so that's all I got to say about that right now. Let's jump on over to law enforcement in D.C. Here's a brief clip. This is news is about 2 days old or so. So, all right, Josh, why don't you let her run? And we get a little stuck here. Oh, goodness. He's got a little glitch. I love technology.
For that. We do want to head to Washington now. The city's police under federal control and the National Guard has been activated. It's all part of President Trump's effort to combat violent crime in the city, despite some stats showing it was already declining. Here's Courtney Cube.
Tonight, hundreds of National Guard troops reporting for duty, awaiting deployment around the nation's capital. Acting on President Trump's orders after he declared a crime emergency, activating 800 Guard members and instituting a 30-day federal takeover of D.C. police, despite police statistics that show violent crime is declining here. We've been watching members of the D.C. National Guard trickle in one by one all day here at the D.C. Armory. Soon as many as 200 at any time will be in neighborhoods like this, where a defense official tells NBC News they'll be supporting law enforcement with activities like crowd management, perimeter control, and other security assistance. Most Guard members won't be armed and won't be making arrests, according to the defense official. Instead, their support is intended to free up law enforcement to fight crime. The White House says its push is already well underway.
Last night, approximately 850 officers and agents were surged across the city. They made a total of 23 arrests.
Those arrests include homicide and drug distribution, according to the White House, which also says homeless people could be jailed if they don't comply with efforts to clear encampments. Some Democrats slamming the move as presidential overreach.
This is about the president playing king, trying to be the authoritarian leader, the dictator.
But after meeting with Attorney General Pam Bondi today, the city's Democratic mayor striking a cooperative tone.
If and while we have this federal surge, we're going to put those officers to good use.
D.C. residents we spoke to today had mixed reactions.
It's unnecessary and frightening. There's crime in any city, and this is not solving a crime problem.
I don't see the need for it. At the same time, if it makes the streets safer, so be it.
And with that, Courtney joins us live. Courtney, what exactly is the National Guard going to do right now?
Well, Tom, the 800 troops have been activated, but they're still checking in, getting their orders. A small number are starting to move out to various locations around the city. But the reality is this entire process of getting them on the streets will take until the end of the week. Tom?
All right, Courtney Cube with a lot of new reporting there. Courtney, we thank you.
Okay, that's good.
Preparations are
All right, there. Thank you, Josh. What gets to me about this story a little bit, first of all, let's go over a couple of the details. One, they says crime is declining in D.C. Why? Because they fudged the books. And that came out a couple of days after this report came out, that the head of the police union of D.C. said that the city or the District of Columbia fudged the books. They basically did not report certain crimes. They did not accurately assess the statistics. And so the idea that crime is declining in D.C. because they base it on these stats, he said, is just a figment of their imagination. And that he said his cops, this is the union leader talking, say that the streets are as bad as ever. Okay, so 2 or 3 other things get to my kind of stuck in my craw about this, and one is that the young woman or the older woman, I don't know how old she is, that woman they interviewed in that clip said, "Oh, there's crime in any city, not in her neighborhood." Let's be very clear where this crime is taking place. It's not taking place in the capital area, nor is it taking place in Georgetown, the elite part of D.C., where this woman is walking around. It doesn't take place there. It takes place where most of the majority population of D.C. live. D.C. is a very poor town, except for one section of it, and that's where the politicians and the lobbyists and the elites live. D.C. has the worst schools in the country, and that's not an exaggeration. It is. They are the worst schools in the country. And that's what gets to me about so many of the elite and the politicians, particularly the Democrats, who talk about, well, there's no crime here, but there's no crime in my neighborhood, therefore there's no crime. Or it's in any city, not in your area, because you all have access to private security and you have access to the police department to make sure your streets are patrolled and things of that nature. You live in gated neighborhoods with codes on the gates and stuff like that. So don't hand me this rubbish that, oh, it's just another town. You know, the people that are suffering the most in this crime are basically the poor and middle class, the minority classes, the lower classes, if you will, economically speaking. They're the ones suffering from all this. But as long as I don't have crime in my neighborhood and my little girl goes to a private school, I drive by 4 public schools to go to a private school, everything is wonderful. That's what gets to me. And then Chuck Schumer, my gosh, this got to be he has to have the be in the running for the most obtuse politician in D.C., which is that's some doing right there. He was on a podcast with some TikTok guy whom I never heard of before, and the guy asked him, I'm going to just give the quote, I want to get your reaction to everything that's happening in D.C. But first, a lot of folks on the Republican side, your Republican colleagues, say that they are very scared to walk outside in D.C., that they think this is a completely right thing to do. Senator, are you scared walking around D.C. these days? Schumer replies, I walk around all the time. I wake up early in the morning sometimes, and I take a nice walk as the sun is rising around some of the Capitol and other monuments and things, and I feel perfectly safe. They're full of it. Really, Mr. Schumer? You just get up and take a stroll through the Capitol building or Capitol area and whatever else. You know how many men and women are on his security detail? Guess, Josh, how many people are guarding Chuck Schumer as he walks around the neighborhood?
I'm going to say a couple dozen.
23 is 23? Right. Good guess.
Hey.
Good guess. 23. 23 people guard Chuck Schumer, so he feels perfectly safe walking around. Hakeem Jeffries says the same thing. I don't have any problem walking around here. Well, he also has a massive security detail. Chuck Schumer didn't walk anywhere by himself. He didn't go to the can by himself. And so for him to say, oh, it's perfectly safe, it's like they let him eat cake kind of attitude. It's safe in this city. Doesn't everybody have 23 people guarding them as they walk around? I really took offense to that, because that's the same problem that happens in almost all these other major cities. All the major cities that have all these crime problems that are led by these left-wingers, if you will. I'm not really used to saying those kind of things, but you know, people that are very woke, if you will, in their police enforcement, and they want to cut down on police enforcement and numbers of cops and things like that. They say our city is safe. Well, at least my neighborhood is, and and they're all secluded from the reality of what's going on in their own cities. Okay. And the senator that was talking, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, he wouldn't walk through Baltimore in an armored guard car. I mean, Baltimore is a dangerous city. And we all know cities here, just you and I know cities in our own state. There are areas we don't go, okay? And that's it. I mean, so these people are talking about our cities are safe are saying my square block may be safe, and that's all that matters. And so am I in favor of what Trump is doing? It's not so much I'm in favor. I'm sorry that it's become necessary in the cities. I used to love Chicago. I haven't been there in a long time. I'm not ever going back to Chicago. Not only is it the worst run state in the union now, thanks to Pritzker and the city of Chicago and their mayor, Brandon Johnson, but it's not safe. Okay? Even the high tourist areas like Michigan Avenue have crime now that they never had before. I'm not going to walk around the city like I did with my wife 16 years ago. Same thing with New York. My wife and I went to New York in the late 90s, and we didn't really feel much concern. I wouldn't go to New York now. I would never get on the subways. And the thing is, I know people that have been in New York lately, and they say, well, that's not so bad, got around and, blah, blah, blah. But you still read reports about homeless or people in psychotic episodes causing all sorts of trouble in the streets. And you look at what's happened in D.C., they have 700 fewer cops now than they did at the height of COVID. They've cut back on the police force. City of Oakland, okay, 678 cops total for that whole city. Okay? The number one priority, and Mr. Fletcher here on our air has said the same thing, the number one priority of any municipal government is the protection and security of its citizens. Police and fire and EMT. And everything else is second to that. It doesn't matter how well paved your streets are if you're afraid to go on them. Okay? Now, we don't have that problem in Burleson, but we have crimes, of course, obviously. But we have a police force that's not going to mess around with it. And fortunately, we live in a state that doesn't, most places don't really have that attitude that you have in D.C. or New York. But you look at Austin, okay? Austin is not safe anymore. They because of the way they have handled law enforcement as not a crime, but as like some sort of sociological problem. You have rampant homelessness. You have people on the street that cause threats or threats to security. You look at some other communities. Texas, maybe not as bad as some, but you look at, you look at some of these communities, and it's like war zones. Detroit, St. Louis is the most violent city in the country. And by a bullet. That's not a good pun. I wasn't trying to be a pun, but when I say with a bullet, it's St. Louis is number one in terms of violent crime, and number two is like way behind. That would be New Orleans. Okay. Atlanta is becoming very, very dangerous. Why? Because the municipal governments of those communities are so beholden to woke ideologies and these other type of law enforcement philosophies that treat crime as a social problem and not as a criminal problem. And it's making life very tough in these cities. And here's what gets to me most. Who is paying the price for that? Supposedly, the people that the Democrats in these cities are supposed to be speaking for. The poor, the working class, the minority, etc. They're the ones taking the brunt for all of this. That's what makes me so mad about the hypocrisy of this thing on the Democrat side, is that the people that are most hurt by it are supposedly the ones they supposedly speak for. The Texas Democrats take off to Illinois to protest the redrawing of districts because they say that's going to be hurting the black cause. You know what hurts the black cause? Crime in the streets that is unaddressed because we're too busy, trying to get on The View or, MSNBC. I've had this feeling about these cities for a long time. I really like the cities. They got great culture. They got great restaurants. They got great shopping. They got some landmark buildings and things of that nature. I was really into that, but I can't go there anymore because it's just too dangerous. And in some ways too expensive because Illinois has the highest hotel tax in the country. So, if you go to Chicago, you'll be paying probably about a third of your bill as tax. That's another story. But it just gets to me a little bit, is that the people that supposedly speak on behalf of the poor are the ones that don't have to live in these cities. They don't live in these communities. They don't go to these schools. There isn't a politician in D.C. has put their child in a D.C. public school, yet they'll go to the mat for public education. They'll go to the mat for this social type of policing, yet they live behind guarded communities with security. And the thing is, our politicians aren't exempt from this. We've had in the last 2 years, Representative Angie Craig of Minnesota was assaulted in her building. Henry Cuellar had his car jacked about 18 months ago. We had a representative from California who's carjacked at the Navy Yard in D.C. And then in January 24, we had a young man that was killed, a congressional intern. And then what triggered Trump, I guess, is one of his government employees, one of his Doge guys, got beat up. Well, but that's my point. Don't talk to me about how you're there for the poor and the minority and the underclass unless you're really experiencing what they're going through. If you are, then good for you. I'll listen to what you have to say. But, when Chris Van Hollen gets up there and says, this is, a farce, we don't need this, he hasn't been in downtown Baltimore unescorted in his life. Irma Vidic. We just got back from weeks in Europe. The consensus we got was that America in general is too dangerous to visit. Thank you. I have to believe that's true. And we don't even enforce a lot of the crimes. That's the thing. Most crimes now are going unreported. Okay, they're going unreported. Why? Because many people have given up on the policing of their communities. Not us here in Burleson. If we have some issue, we'll call our police because we expect something to happen. But a lot of these communities, petty theft and whatever else, they just let it go because they know it's nothing going to happen. You get assaulted on the streets, Well, it's unfortunate. They're not going to report it because they know nothing's going to happen. And you have some communities like Chicago and others, and Dallas for that matter, where you have almost like a cap on petty theft. So if you steal under that cap, you're off scot-free. They're not even going to prosecute it. That's why so many of the CVS stores in Dallas and others have their stuff behind glass. Okay? But anyway, I appreciate that, Irma, because, I love the cities. I'd love to go to Europe. I haven't been in a while. Gosh, a long, long time. Okay, but that's not the point. But it is, we've gotten to the point where if you object to what Mr. Trump's doing in D.C., he had the opening to do it. He had the excuse to do it. All right, Irma says that as I was growing up and going back to visit family, I used to regularly have people say, "You're so lucky you live there," to now being too dangerous to vacation in. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't feel particularly at risk. Oh, what is this?
Brad, I don't know if you've seen this because
No.
You were talking about Austin, but this is also something that's been happening right across the road in Dallas.
Okay.
Deep Ellum is basically shutting down the streets. It started 10 p.m. on weekend nights. It's now, I believe, 10 p.m. on weekends, and I want to say midnight.
Well,
everywhere
are the
else.
businesses being closed, or are they just not going to allow traffic? It's just going to be foot traffic.
That's a good question.
What
Let me do a
I
little more research.
Well, I kind of have a hard time thinking they're going to close the bars down, but I appreciate you throwing that up there.
No,
but,
there are some bars that are I believe, fully closing.
Okay, yeah.
Rodeo Dallas is a really popular nightlife spot over there.
I read about that one. They said they closed, they reopened, but they have to reclose again because of this. Deep Ellum. When I was a kid, when I was your young age, I didn't hang around Deep Ellum much, but I've been there. And, they had interesting little bars, and they had, interesting stores and stuff like that, and restaurants, the whole 9 yards. I wouldn't go there now. It's too dangerous. Now, I feel that way about Sundance Square. Not really, but not, why? Because Fort Worth makes it a priority to do it, plus you have bad security. Okay? There are other areas, I hear around 7th Street here in Fort Worth. It's getting dicey.
Oh, yeah.
And just about every place that attracts young people with a few bucks and don't have a good time is going to attract crime. Well, now, I find our options being slowly taken away from us because of the lack of security. And that's what really bothers me. I did love Chicago, but I can't go back there now. I thought New York was great. We were in Manhattan. My wife and I saw a couple of shows, restaurants. We had the massive flea market at the foot of the World Trade Center, which was still there. And we went up the Empire State Building, yada, yada, yada. Boston, my wife and I have been there. We loved it. We can't go back because the crime is too bad. And then you got politicians like Van Hollen and Schumer saying it's not that bad. Just ask my security team. We need to have policing in these cities that means business, but we don't. And people point some of the other things about, look what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd and whatever else. Yeah, that happened, and it was terrible, and it was wrong, and it was awful. But look what's happened in Minneapolis now. It's basically worse than the Wild West because they went so far the other direction. I remember seeing about a year after it, Minneapolis went to this social policing. Basically, they in certain areas, they wouldn't call cops, they'd call for social workers to intervene in certain things. And that failed totally. Why? Because the social workers said, we're not going in there. It's too dangerous. And they would call for people, and no one would go take care of it because it was just too dangerous. The police are trained, they are armed, they are prepared to take care of these kind of problems, not social workers. All right, I'm running out of time. To kind of recap the other points, watch today what happens with Zelensky and the Europeans with Mr. Trump. And if I'm talking about Ukraine 6 months from now, I'm going to refrain heartily from saying, I told you so. But I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that Trump got played so bad by Putin because the killing is going to continue. He's going to be rewarded for his aggression. And it really, really bothers me. And if we are in a situation now where we have to put our own personnel in this situation to back up Mr. Trump's lack of resolve with Mr. Putin, then we're going to have real problems. Second of all, to finish about D.C., I've been to D.C. I was there. The kids are small then. And we didn't have any problems. I'm not going back now. And, and it's sad. Our nation's capital is basically a no-go zone. All those monuments, all those buildings, all that history, all the atmosphere of D.C., and it's not going to be there. And don't listen to the politicians. They don't live real lives. They live in secluded areas protected by the government. They don't have any contact with the people they supposedly are advocating for. They don't know them through schools. They don't know them through their daily lives. They don't do business with them. They know nothing except where's the check. And that's all I got to say about that. I don't know exactly when this will be on the radio. I have to head for Corsicana right now. Yeah. I don't.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, you know why.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Not to get too personal on the air, but my father is not doing well. And so my sister and I are taking shifts, taking care of him. That may put my schedule on the podcast and on the radio a little bit in flux, depending on how this all is resolved and when it's resolved. My guess is it'll be resolved before the end of August. Now, again, I'm not real big on, all this personal revelation business because, that it is what it is and that kind of thing. But that's why if I have to cancel immediately, it may be because the time has come. And so, anyway, tomorrow, assuming, Victoria on. And I'll ask her about police work, but we're also going to talk about the budget. The budget is going on right now, and the process of it. And they're going to vote on it in about 3 or 4 weeks, but they're in the middle of creating it right now, a very tedious process. But here's the thing. She will tell you, Mayor Fletch will tell you, Larry Scott will tell you, all the people that I routinely converse with will tell you, if you have an interest in the budget, they need to know it. They have workshops, they have meetings you can attend, you can go to the council meetings. But if you have comments and ideas about the budget, you need to go. Because to find out what's in the budget and then bellyache about it after it's been passed is tedious and tiresome. And it doesn't do any good. I mean, there's not much they can do to change the budget after it's been voted upon. So if you think that we need to spend more or less money on certain things, they need to know. Email them, go to the meetings, whatever. All right. As far as the radio, this will be on. Maybe it'll be on tomorrow at 1:00. I know, and maybe tomorrow afternoon or evening, because like I said, I'll be out of pocket for the rest of the day. Josh, thank you for your quick updates. You go to Deep Ellum much, by the way?
I used to, quite a bit. That's the big concert scene.
Yeah,
concert crowd.
The Bomb Factory still there?
Bomb Factory, yes.
Yeah,
Bomb Factory. Mm-hmm. I believe it's now called just the Factory.
Okay. There was another place that, it's been 30 years since I've been there, and that's where we'd see live music, but I think it's long gone. But what's really interesting about it is there's like 4 rooms, and all 4 rooms are completely different in decor. And, totally different in decor. It wasn't like the same theme at all. Mm. So it's just really weird. And, of course, Deep Ellum is weird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Deep Ellum.
Yeah. But they had before I was a school teacher, I was a financial analyst, and I had certain areas of Dallas, and that was one of them. And I would be analyzing businesses down there. And they'd all these retail shops, resale stuff, or, that's where you got all the cool gear and all this other stuff. Back in the day, huh?
Back in the day.
Yeah, but now, because what you just showed, it's not the same, is it?
Sucks.
You're mid to late 20s. Where do y'all go to hang out?
Me?
Yeah, well, yeah. Where's your crew? Where do you go hang out in this town, in Fort Worth?
In Fort Worth?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Gusto's.
Well,
really good spot.
Well, I'm talking about like area of town.
Oh, area of town.
Yeah.
I tend to stick around like the South Main to Magnolia district.
Yeah, Magnolia's good, but it's also picked up on Number Street people.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. because there's a couple of places down there. There's a couple of decent restaurants. There's Proper Bar, which is a good bar, and now it's in that South Main area. I've been there. It's really not my scene, man. You know, it's a little younger crowd, but I've been there
you gotta
once.
know what to look for.
Well, there was a place, and it's still there, I think, that we stopped by one time, my friend and I. And the crowd was a little younger than us, but I see the rest of the crowd and walking around the streets. It's a younger crowd, you know.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
if I don't see Geritol on the menu, I don't think it's my place. Right. Or X-Lax or whatever. All right, guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow, God willing.